Department of Behavioral Sciences at Hostos, and my colleague, Professor Seixas, does the same thing, except he teaches different courses because he's a clinical psychologist and I'm a social psychologist. So today I'm going to show you my hybrid social psychology course, and this is the first hybrid I've ever taught, and I've taught online before, and I've taught face-to-face, obviously, but I've not combined the two, so this was an interesting experience for me. And one thing I found that I want to say right away before I forget is that it forced me to focus. It forced me to say, what is the most important thing I need to do with this class today? Since we only have one meeting a week, an hour and 15 minutes, and so it forces me to stay on track and to say, what's the most important thing? Which I think is a really good thing for me as a faculty member. Because you could get lost in trying to do everything, and I gave up that a long time ago. But this is my course. I have a picture of New York City that I took from Facebook and saved on my home computer. I decided to use it. I like it. Anyway, my course is fairly streamlined. What I wanted to show you is what I use in my course to help, I think, heighten my students' curiosity and heighten their motivation for the subject matter. Social psychology is a survey course, just like general psychology, except its subject matter is how we interact with other human beings. And so it's a very interesting course, I think, and I love it, obviously, or would have majored in it. But sometimes it gets dense, and sometimes it's hard, because the answer is always, it depends, no matter what question I'm asking. And the way I have my course set up is I have everything under the assignments tab, so I try to make it very streamlined and very easy to find everything. And I wanted to show you a few things that I think help build the interactivity of the class and help stimulate their curiosity, and also help us go deeper into some subjects. So one thing I wanted to show you is way down week 11, the prejudice chapter. I talk to my students about the difference between attitudes that we're willing to express to people, expressed attitudes or explicit attitudes, and attitudes that we may not be aware of or certainly aren't willing to express to people. And there's a measure in social psychology called the implicit association test that we can use to measure those implicit attitudes. And so I actually have a link to the IAT here, and they can go and take it. I didn't force them to take it this time, but I probably will in the future, because I've seen some articles in Teaching of Psychology about how you can use this and how you can incorporate it with scientific articles to kind of deepen their understanding of what this is, and then they'll actually think it's a valid assessment of their own implicit attitudes. But if you don't do that, then they tend to think, oh, I'm not biased, no. And they still don't believe that they're biased even after they take this. So I think that would be helpful next time I teach it. I just wanted to show you, don't worry, we're not going to do it, that it's measuring implicit attitudes, those that you normally don't express, on a wide variety of topics: disability, religion, race, gender, weapons, and there's more down below as well. And so I let them choose which ones they wanted to try and take, and then skin tone, age, weight, sexuality. And then I had them take them and then come back to class, and we used it as a discussion of implicit attitudes and what this instrument is supposed to measure. So this is kind of one way I tried to make it interactive, but not in a coercive kind of way, I guess. Also, every week, what I do is, well, not every week, I guess, but I also have them do exercises outside of class and bring them to class. Because these are things normally I would do in my classes. I like to teach in a very interactive way, so I like to give my students psychological tests. And this is one called the Just World Scale. And I'll show you it really exists.
It's opening.
And it's the same chapter, and what we're doing is measuring a person's tendency to blame the victim, essentially, and believe that the world is a just place. But I didn't tell them that's what it was measuring. I just said, here, take this scale. It's related to chapter 9. Oops. And then I always do stuff like that. But that's okay. Yes, is it down there below? See, this is when I wish I had my map. Whoops, open. Then I hopefully won't close it again. answer, strongly agree, strongly disagree to a series of questions, and then they bring it to class. And then we use a little slice of our class time to score it, talk about how we score instruments in psychology, and also so they get their score, so they can figure out whether or not they believe the world is just, and are more likely to blame the victims of like number 2, basically the world is a just place, and then they have all these questions. Good deeds often go unnoticed and unrewarded. I mean, this is a scale that's been validated in social psychology, been out there for a long, long time, and has lots of research on it. So I like to show them these instruments that we use to measure all these things that we talk about in class, and show them that we really can measure these things, and that we can score it and talk about it, and they can relate it to their own lives too. And I think that's very, very helpful. I also use very traditional kinds of things too, like traditional videos on social psychology, and I won't subject you to those too much, but like you have researchers like Claude Steele, who's an African-American researcher. This is from the library that goes with the book, talking about their own research and what they're doing. And is there volume on this thing?
I first became involved when I moved to the University of Michigan.
These aren't like thrilling or anything, but they show researchers talking about their own research and what they're doing. And they also show, in this case, African-American researchers, which I think is great to show our students that all of us can go out and do this and we can become researchers. So I assign these every week, different videos for them. I'm not going to
Regulation, self.
So that's kind of the traditional thing I do, but I also want to make things fun. And so what I do to make things fun is, let's see, 5 or 6. We're going to go back up to a different week. And I use Comedy Central, because I like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, and they're very good social psychologists. They're excellent social psychologists. And I just want to give you a clip, a small taste of a clip from one of them. There's 2 I use. One is called The Summer of the Shark. And it demonstrates something called the availability heuristic, which is this idea that if we can call something to mind, remember something, then we think it's more common than it really is. And I also use another one on cognitive dissonance because Lewis Black, who's on the Daily Show, did a big thing about Earth Day, and it is hilarious. And so sometimes I show you in class when I teach this course face-to-face. And usually they like it a lot. It's going to be like a commercial, probably.
I watch a lot of movies. I know what I'm doing.
Critics and audiences everywhere have spoken.
Seem very happy.
Pain and Gain is the #1 movie in America. Are you in?
Yeah.
Pain and Gain, rated R, now playing.
There's no way to increase the volume on these?
It's something on the wall that's happening.
Oh, maybe there.
Technically, only Fox makes it profitable. Our own Stephen Colbert is here to separate fact
I'll
from
play for
fiction.
like a minute for you to see what I'm talking about.
Last year, the media tried to tell us it was the summer of the shark.
Summer of the Shark.
Summer of the Sharks.
The Summer of the Shark.
But they were just trying to scare us to boost their ratings. So what's the real deal? Miami Seaquarium shark expert Chris Plant set the record straight.
Is this the summer of the shark? No. Shouldn't we be scared of these sharks? No. Really, to put it in perspective, more people are killed each year by falling coconuts than sharks. Excuse me, wait, what's that? Did you say coconuts? More coconuts kill people each year than sharks do.
The figures don't lie. 10 deaths a year from shark attacks versus 150 from head injuries due to falling coconuts. To find out why these predators from above crave our skulls,
when you see it this way, it's like, oh yeah, well, well, at least I think so. I'm biased, whatever. So that's kind of the fun stuff I do. I also post videos that are replications of really classic classic studies in social psychology that are done today. Because it's really common for students to say, oh, that wouldn't happen today. And I'm like, you're wrong. You're wrong. How can I prove it to you? Let me show you. And so, week 7, okay. I'm glad I wrote down what weeks everything. Okay, 7. Oh yeah, I know what. So there's a replication of a video of an experiment, Sharif's norm formation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Goldstein. I'm with the College of Optics and Photonics. We have a little experiment that we're asking for your help with today. Basically, we're testing the cone to rod ratio in your eyes to see the average propensity for the density for the laser that we're going to shine on the wall for the average human distance sight test. So basically, all you need to do is it's very simple. I'm going to shine the laser pointer on the wall for about 2 or 3 seconds, and I need you to just tell me how far that you believe that the laser pointer has moved in your best guesstimate in inches.
Social psychologists love to mess with people.
3 inches.
3 inches, subject 2. 3 to 4, subject 3.
3 inches.
3 inches,
I'm going to say 5.
5 inches. Subject 1,
5 inches.
5 inches, 5 inches, 4 inches. Subject 1, how far do you believe?
The light's not moving at all. At all. It's stationary. Yet, because the Confederates are saying it's moving, the person's going along with the Confederates. This is about conformity and the formation of a group norm about how much the light is moving. So I think it's a really interesting one. And it shows them this dry study they're reading about in the textbook, too. And it says, look, these are people that are not that much older than you now, probably, when this was done. And it still happens. So, you can't say it wouldn't happen today. And so I like to make that point, too, to my students. I don't want you to think all I do is the fun stuff. I mean, we have discussion forums every week, and they have to reply to questions, and then I use that as a substitute for in-class discussions. And sometimes we do bring it into the class and talk about things, like we had one about which scenarios are actually aggression, according to social psychologists. And then they brought it into the classroom and we talked some more about it because they were really interested in it. Also, because I'm now more focused on what I'm doing, I was able to tailor that lecture to something current. So I found that most of our topic for that day was talking about gun violence instead of theories of aggression and all the stuff that we could have talked about, which is in their textbook. But gun violence is a very real issue today, and there's lots of research on how people who own guns are more likely to be killed by their own guns in their own house by someone they know. And so we talked about all that research, and so it was a very interesting and timely topic, and they were really interested in it too. So sometimes the discussion forums do come into the class, but I'm using it sometimes too as a substitute for that time that we would have spent in class discussing that. I also give them homework assignments, 1 for each test, so it's 3 this semester. And they kind of mimic what the test will be like, and the tests are harder, and their homework assignments they can do multiple times because I use it as a learning experience. But I tell them the test will be like this, and it'll be harder, so you better be prepared. And I think that's one of the hard things about teaching a hybrid class is you still have students with some of the same behaviors as a face-to-face class, like they're not reading, they're not studying, they don't believe me when I tell them the test will be hard. So the first one. Except for the students who have had me before, and those students are the ones doing the best in class. And they know me, and they know I mean it, and so they don't have to get used to that. There's no learning curve for them. They had me last semester. And so that's helpful, I think. And I do exams in class. I don't let them do them online. So I'm pretty strict about that, because I want to see what they know. And I still believe in giving exams. In psychology, they're a very content-laden topic. We cannot just, I have trouble not giving exams, and maybe that's my background too. I probably took too much of the time. Anyway, I'm let Azizi.
Awesome.
Do you want me to just move this your way?
Sure, I'll just flip it up.
You do that.
discussing is the iPad initiative that our school, I think we have piloted. This is our second semester that we've piloted it right now. And so Dr. Wolfe and I are actually in the second wave of this pilot project. And so one of the things that I'll be discussing today is just to kind of give you guys an idea as to how is it that we got involved in the iPad initiative. So I actually, as Dr. Wolfe said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I teach psychology courses, primarily general psychology and abnormal psychology. And one of the things that I just wanted to share with you in terms of the history of my time, my tenure at Hostos. I've been there for a year and a half in different capacities as an adjunct, as well as a substitute full-time and now full-time. And one of the things that really jumped out at me were some of the classroom risk factors that our students had, such as a motivation in terms of the lack of an appetite for learning. I also found that students had problems with attention and concentration and information processing. Students also, and it's kind of hard for me to diagnose, and some of the times I have to kind of step back a little as a clinician, not to diagnose students per se, but I use it with great utility to improve my teaching practice. But I find that students have difficulties with surface and deep knowledge. Students also have issues with scaffolded learning, particularly being able to use an application in a previous chapter and use it with another chapter that we discuss later on, and as well as language issues. And I mean, particularly our institution at Hostos is a primarily Hispanic serving institution, and so one of the things that we have students who speak English as a second language. But in addition to those students, I also find that we have students who are what I deem as they're at the sub-level of literacy. And lastly, some of the issues that I see is that students also have issues with contextual learning, being able to apply some of the things that we teach them in class and apply it to their everyday life. And so one of the things that I tried to do was to juxtapose those risk factors with the protective factors that I saw. Our students are tremendously smart, they're hardworking and very resourceful. And so how is it that, I thought reflectively, how is it then that we could actually use those protective factors as buffers against these risk factors? And one of the things that I wanted to bring today at this conference was to show how the hybrid as well as the iPad initiative are great tools to help buffer the risk factors that I've just identified. And it really taps into the protective factors that I just outlined. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight for you is that teaching the iPad for this semester, I really believe that the iPad has resolved some, if not most, of the issues that I have identified in terms of addressing the risk. Caveat being the assessment was qualitative and anecdotal. And later on I'll speak about future directions, particularly in ways in which we intend on moving forward with the hybrid and the iPad initiative. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, which I wanted to do, and one of the things that I wanted to address was, I wanted to address two different types of people here. Those people who are just so overwhelmed by technology and feel like, oh my goodness, I could never ever do anything that is so technologically advanced. And so I wanted to really allay their fears because even though I would consider myself technologically savvy, I do have those fears as well. And also, I would also want to speak to those people who, and I have to be very careful how I say this, the people who are very traditionalist in terms of their approach to teaching, who believe in this very kind of a traditional way of teaching in terms of blackboard and not much interactive stuff. And one of the things that I want to say to those two groups, that the hybrid and the initiative and the iPad initiative really augments and enhances your ability to deliver the lessons that you intend. So one of the things I wanted to show was that the iPad, I use the iPad in all my courses. I also teach a hybrid course in abnormal psychology, as well as general psychology classes. And I use them in both classes. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to kind of show how the iPad in and of itself really is kind of like a conduit where it grants students the access into other material. I also wanted to show that the iPad is a tremendous resource as well in terms of providing students with background information as well as the professor with background information to really bring it into the classroom, because usually you know, I guess the physical boundaries of the class would always limit the level of discussion and interaction that would go on in class, and the iPad really shatters that and really kicks down the doors virtually. Also, I wanted to talk about that the iPad itself is not a platform. It's not a platform, it's a tool. And I'll show exactly how that I went about to do that. And also, for those people who might be, I guess, apprehensive in adopting it, that the iPad itself is not a pedagogy, it's a tool. And so many people who adhere to certain pedagogical structures or paradigms, you're using the iPad, you do not change it at all. I think in many ways it allows you to be more nimble in executing whatever pedagogy you actually subscribe to. And so I wanted to give you an idea as to the different types of apps that I actually use. So for instance, in general psychology, in our neuroscience chapter, it's really hard to really show students and to explain the different structures of the brain. And one of the things that Dr. Wolfe and I, we really put our heads together and we really, really combed through the wide base of apps that were offered. And we found this really cool app, and it's free. And one of the things that I want to say, most of the apps that we have are free. I believe the only one I paid for was 99 cents. And so I was really kind of tempted to call our title iPad on a Dime, or machine on a Dime or something. But one of the things that I found in the past was that it was really hard to give students a 3D representation as to where the different structures of the brains are. Oftentimes, I would kind of contort myself in different positions to show them exactly where the different structures are. And one of the things I wanted to show you was that you could really orient it, and it's really cool. And I mean, just looking at it aesthetically, students are like, so like, wow, this is cool. And when you show them the different structures and all of that, and you want to show them the different labels, and it shows up what the different parts are. One of the things that I also do is when I want to look at information, and it gives a kind of a tab thing, a side representation of information, where you could scroll through case studies, showing what are the functions of the different parts of the brain, implications, as well as current research. Both Dr. Wolfe and I are committed to integrating research as part of our pedagogy as well. There's so many different types of apps that I would like to say, but because of time, I'm unable to do so. But I just wanted to mention them just in case you might be interested in looking at it for yourself. There's a Stroop effect, which looks at our ability to use our right and left side brains, as well as our executive functioning, to determine whether or not if you should look at the specific details of certain things. So the Stroop effect, for those of you who do not know what it is, so you'll flash a word and it will say white, but it's in purple, and you're asked to say what the color is as opposed to what the word reads. And so it's really difficult and to really bring that to life as to how the different parts of the brain actually coordinate and how you link that to intelligence. There are other apps, Illusions for iPad, which shows really cool different types of illusions. For my abnormal psychology, I use the case file for psychiatry, where you actually go through detailed case assessments. There's also psych assessments, where that's the one I paid 99 cents for, where it really gives you a wide, a wide range of psychological assessment tools, ranging from education to mental health to social psychology. It's only 99 cents, and it's right there. And you literally have students do it and plugs it, and it spits out the data already in normative ways as well. So it's really cool. You don't have to like go through all of that, index grading. And so what are some challenges? Because most of you might say, what are some of the challenges that you experience? Well, the challenge is the dynamism of technology and iPad. It's a blessing and a curse, right? Where one of the things that I encountered was that there are sometimes when I really liked an app, and then when I, later on in the semester I saw a better app, and I'm like, oh, I should use that, or should have used that, or maybe this particular app was more appropriate. Some other challenges, the cost. If you're not a cheapo like me, and maybe if you want to use other apps, it can be costly. Also, technical issues, Wi-Fi versus 3G capability. I oftentimes encountered issues where, particularly when I go to Psych Interactives, where you need a web browser to access information, it was really, really hard. And also, the last challenge was being comfortable with the technological tool. And I can say that the comfort level is on a continuum. So it's not black and white saying, well, you're either good with computers or you're not good with computers. As I said, I consider myself to be somewhat technologically savvy, but sometimes it was a little hard, so you have to play with it, So lastly, just want to say, where do we want to go with this? It would be neat to do some kind of assessment, looking at control and treatment groups, particularly seeing how it influences test scores, attitudes toward learning, and metacognitions, which are all very, very potent factors in influencing learning. Just want to acknowledge Carlos Guevara, Kate Lyons, and Wilfredo Rodriguez for spearheading the hybrid and the iPad initiatives. Thank you.